A big part of what we talk about here is kind of the evolution and where genres can go in terms of the market today and beyond. And there are some genres that have definitely struggled with this. I recently caught a presentation as Olivier Nelson gave for ThinkyCon, which is it was kind of like an online presentation for puzzles and puzzle-based design. And he discussed a problem that a lot of the developers have in that space when it comes to reaching the greater market, and it really echoes some of the things that I've seen in other genres, particularly the strategy, adventure, and roguelike genres. So for today's video, I'm going to get into a lot of trouble and talk about where developers tend to, I think, obsess over a genre too much. The 2010s was a decade that I really have talked about being phenomenal when it comes to indie development and the growth of a lot of subgenres and new ways of designing games. Your action roguelikes and roguelites, deck builders, the kind of changing of real-time strategy with stuff like They Are Billions, and many different takes on platformers, gambling, bullet heavens, reverse bullet hells, however we want to call them. And we have certainly have seen this to the point where these games break into the mainstream. Again, probably one of the most famous examples would be Five Nights at Freddy's with horror. And whenever we talk about games like this, it's important to point out that whether you like or dislike them is kind of besides the point. These games become these massive points for pop culture, and it also begins to change and allow a growing acceptance and experimentation in the genre itself. If we didn't have Five Nights at Freddy's, we would have never gotten Outlast, nor would have gotten Resident Evil 7. The public combo games will probably still have struggled in terms of achieving mainstream. And again, the likes of all the different deck builders, roguelites, and all that. But there are a few genres in particular that have yet to really have this moment. And it has to do, I think, with this trap that developers have when it comes to, I guess, the reverence for classic or traditional design. So in one of the reviews I got from my book on roguelike design, someone gave me a negative review saying that Josh didn't bring up every single roguelike released in the past 30 years. And if you know roguelike design, you know just how crazy and silly of a complaint that is. But it represents, again, this kind of misconception about design. And there's a difference between genre qualifiers and kind of the aesthetics or UX of a genre, the things that you're trying to instill in it. Whether it's, brutal difficulty of something like Fear and Hunger, the whimsical nature of a Kirby game, or even just getting the challenging builds and combinations of a deck builder like Library of Runa, Monster Train, Slay the Spire, and so on, versus what people view as kind of these tenets or the 10 commandments of a specific genre. And it's why when I talk about genres in the books and when I do the game design videos or the design guide videos, I try to do a very healthy mix of old and new games. Again, it's still important if you're going to build a first-person shooter to understand what Doom did right. Just as important to understand what Super Mario World did right. But as I always say, if you think designing a game as close and as mirrored to Super Mario World, Doom, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and so on, that is the, height or the goal you're trying to achieve, it's not. Those are the baselines. And more importantly, you have to understand what the market, and more specifically, what the consumer base today is looking for. And we can see this in a very rapid way with how much mobile and live service games have evolved and changed over the 2010s. In the beginning of the 2010s, mobile games were the heights of stuff like Angry Birds, Farmville, Clash of Clans, Flappy Bird, and so on. Today, you have multi-million-dollar successes, and even more than that now, with stuff like the MiHoYoverse, Ark Knights, so many of these games I'm completely blanking on at the moment. And like I said a few minutes ago, whether you love or hate them is besides the point. This is how these markets grow, and more importantly, this is how a market begins to open up. That once people like a really big example of this, you can start experimenting with those designs and aspects. And Balatro is a really great example of this. It's a deck builder, but it's also this kind of plays off of poker and gambling. And now we've seen a lot more of those games. And when we have these markets open up, again, not only does it allow more people to make kind of traditional games in it, but it also means that there is room for experimental, weird, unique niche ideas that would never have been thought of or even considered because the kind of quote-unquote mainstream audience of those genres would have said no, or designers felt like they didn't adhere to what makes the genre work. So the targets for today's video are going to be the strategy genre, point-and-click adventure genre, and the roguelike genre. So I'm going to say something that is going to get me probably cancelled very easily. And that is, strategy games, adventure games, and traditional roguelikes are some of the worst games to make today. They are absolutely horrible games for the market. And right now, a few of you are typing angry comments below, especially the adventure game fans. Because again, we've spoken with Dave Gilbert a few times here. We've talked a lot about puzzle design, point-and-click adventure games. But to counter that, I have a question I'm going to pose you that's going to cause so much psychic damage to you that again, I need to reach out to Red Hook to make me a minor enemy in Darkest Dungeon 2. So here it goes. Can any of you tell me the last time that a traditional roguelike, again, not a deck builder or an action or a roguelite, a point-and-click adventure game, or a real-time strategy game has sold between 2 to 5 million copies on Steam? I'll wait. Actually, no, I won't. This video will be like an hour or two long. I'll answer the question for you. The last two strategy games that have broken 2 to 5 million would be They Are Billions and Age of Empires 4. The last adventure game to do that is... There's your answer to that. And if you're thinking traditional roguelike has broken 2 to 5 million copies in the last 5 years, well, I got a few bridges I could sell you right now. And when I say it like this, I know the next thing someone's going to type in the comments down below. Who cares? Who cares that an adventure game hasn't sold millions of copies? Or that we haven't seen a traditional roguelike or an RTS? If the fans are happy, if the developers and their tight-knit communities are happy, who cares? Well, you see, this is why certain genres stagnate in the industry. And again, the adventure game genre, if you talk to developers who've been around the longest, they've been feeling this for years. The last time a point-and-click adventure game really broke out into the mainstream market would be the Telltale genre, or the Telltale heights, with Sam & Max, The Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, and so on. And there has not been an adventure game since mentioned in the mainstream. No matter how much we all love Watchet Eye Games, or what was it, the excavation of Hobbs Barrow from last year. And the roguelike genre, or again, specifically traditional roguelikes and real-time strategy games, have immensely suffered in terms of the mainstream. And again, that's a major part of the history of the genre. When strategy began to diverge into the MOBA space in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, a lot of real-time strategy games and developers kind of stopped. And as I said in an earlier piece, like Mimimi Games, with the kind of tactical stealth strategy, they didn't create a genre. They didn't bring that genre back. They simply just hit the zenith of that consumer base. And like we've said, there is this trap for a lot of developers who think that the more you put into a game, or the bigger a game is, that it obviously will make a better and more profitable game. If this game takes 10 hours to complete and this game takes 20 hours to complete, surely the 20-hour more will earn double the sales and double the reviews, and all of you are now crying in front of your monitors. But it doesn't happen like that. especially when a genre, no matter how many Ks your engine is using, how many real-time physics and simulations and shaders and ray tracing that your turn-based units are moving, if you're still doing the same exact thing that the genre is known for 30 years ago, a lot of people in the market today don't care. And this is a very bitter pill to swallow for a lot of developers and fans. You probably watching this right now love a point-click adventure game. You probably enjoy your strategies and your traditional roguelikes. But guess what? A lot of people today don't know about them, don't care about them, and no matter how you want to dress them up with new graphics, new names, new buzzwords, you're not getting them to play your game. And if you do get them to play your game, they're going to quit within 10 to 15 minutes of loading it up. Especially if it is a strategy game or any game that involves just hitting the player with numbers and charts and vision cones and everything like that. Because most consumers today, they didn't grow up playing these games. When you ask someone what a roguelike is, and I'm about to punch every roguelike fan in the face with this one, when you ask a roguelike fan today some of their favorite examples, they're going to probably talk about Hades, Slay the Spire, maybe a Dead Cells, maybe a few of them will talk about Spelunky or The Binding of Isaac. I can tell you, a mainstream fan of roguelikes is never going to mention NetHack, Rogue. They may not even know what Rogue is. They may just know what a roguelike is. And why this is a big deal is that these genres in particular haven't had that breakout moment yet. The closest would arguably be They Are Billions, with kind of revitalizing the defend against a horde mode design. And it's why, again, that it sits on Steam Spy at between 2 to 5 million copies sold. I can tell you that not a single traditional RTS that has been released since has come even close to that, other than Age of Empires 4, which again has the name of Relic and Age of Empires backing it. But with these genres, and with any genre in particular, as a developer, you need to understand what someone is wanting out of that genre, and what are things that are just holding it back. There are a lot of people who would love a game built on randomly generated areas and persistence, and this challenge that the levels change and shift every time you play it. You know why we know that? Because everyone fell in love with Hades, or all the fans or people who checked out Returnal. But how many of those people are then going to immediately turn around and say, you know, I want to play a traditional roguelike now? Or they play They Are Billions, now I want to play a traditional RTS. And like I was saying earlier, the fans don't mind this. If they want to play, insert a Company of Heroes style game, there are plenty of them. Just as there are plenty of traditional survival horror games, first-person shooters, platformers, deck builders, roguelikes, dancing games, you name it. But for a market to grow, the consumer base needs to be widened. There has to be people who want to play a brutally difficult, masochistically hard platformer, just as they want to play like a Mario-like, or something simpler, or even something like a Spyro or a Crash. And it's important as a developer to understand that just because something worked 10, 20, 30, even 2 years ago, doesn't mean it's going to work today. I've said this line many times before. Nobody is going to want to play your version of a popular game when they can still play that popular game. In some point in the future, we could probably play Doom on a nail polish on our fingers. People will gravitate towards big names because those are the proven hits of that genre. But if you're trying to grow your own game, if you're trying to do something different, you can't just sit around and say, let me repeat what King's Quest did. Let me repeat what Command and Conquer 1 did all those years ago with the same exact UI and the same exact UX and everything like that. Because the modern market, the people who didn't grow up with these games, the people who've only played modern or more iterated on designs, they don't have any rose-tinted glasses for those titles. They're going to take one look at them, realize how cumbersome and annoying they are, and they're going to move right along. So, I'm going to say something. This is going to be the ultimate shot fired for strategy and roguelike fans. If this doesn't get me canceled, I don't know what will. But wait, just wait right there. I have an idea to avoid this. Just hold on. Hi everyone, this is John, completely unrelated to Josh. And what I wanted to say is that for any kind of turn-based game, be it strategy or roguelike, tile-based systems are terrible. They should have been phased out a long time ago, and no game today should have a slow one tile at a time movement-based system. It is entirely cumbersome, it slows the game down, and it's not helping to bring anyone in today. So wait, I think I hear Josh over there. Let me go get him. Just hold on 1 second. Okay, I'm back everyone. So what did I miss on this topic? With these genres, some of the more interesting successes that we've seen over the past 5 to 7 years have been, again, developers who have all said to themselves, well, I like this part of the genre, but I don't like this. What if I just made my game more about this? Or if I add something from another genre? And you will, of course, have traditional fans with pitchforks and torches ready in the streets to come after you for it. But the only way, again, for a genre to be able to experiment and grow is to look beyond what made it popular 5, 10, 15, 20, and so years ago. Because people want to see something new and original. If all you're doing is designing games specifically for other designers of that genre, or the fans who played that genre 30 years ago, well, that's great and all. But if you think that's going to turn into a thriving and growing game development studio or business, it's not. You are going to peak with your very first game in that space. And again, no matter how great your name is, no matter how fancy your graphics are, how memorable your story is, anything like that, if the person loads it up and just sees the same exact gameplay that they didn't want to play in the best of those examples, they're not sticking around for you. And in today's world, they don't even need to keep or hold that money. They can refund that game. Because the people that we're talking about, they're going to figure out within seconds of playing your game that this is not for me. And it's why for these kinds of very number crunchy or very traditional or very complicated games to play, that these genres aren't growing. They're not getting new consumers. No matter how many people talk about the likes of Unavowed or the Blackwell series, how many people who enjoyed They Are Billions or Age of Empires 4, or even some of the more traditional roguelikes like Shiren the Wanderer, the latest one that just came out, that people gravitate towards major names, but that still doesn't translate into growing this market. Part of the renaissance of horror and shooters that we've had over the past 10 years has been looking at doing many different weird and interesting things with horror. So that it's not just a stock survival horror or a stock action horror. Then we had everyone figure out, well, we don't just make another Five Nights at Freddy's clone or Outlast clone. So now we see more of that. And when the genre is healthy enough, it can support all varieties of games. It has enough room that if you want to make a horror game that takes place in broad daylight and it's about the horror of, I don't know, walking in the park and getting grass stains on your new white shirt, there's probably a market for that. There's interest in it. There's people who want to see more of the genre and see different takes of it. They don't just want to play Here's my Command and Conquer clone, StarCraft clone, my Company of Heroes, Planetary Annihilations. Because yes, while there is a fan base for this, it's still a fixed number of fans. And as years go on and people age out of it or they just stop caring about it, who's going to be left to play those games? So, to end things on, my last question for you watching this. How would you iterate and evolve a RTS game, a roguelike, or a point-and-click adventure game? Where do you think things could go in the future? And how many torches and pitchforks are coming my way now that this video is over? Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.